This video is an introduction to section 17.4 in which we are looking at rotation about a fixed axis. So they give you two sets of equations on page 442, and the first two equations here and also here are just the equations for Newton's second law. We've seen those before back in section 17.2. Here they wrote them in rectangular coordinates, and on page 427 in section 17.3 we had Newton's second law with normal and tangential components, and now they're telling you that the normal component for the mass times the acceleration is mass times angular velocity squared times r sub g, and for the tangential component, mass times angular acceleration times r sub g. And when we looked at the acceleration in normal tangential components back in chapter 16, we had this equation here. So we have angular velocity squared times r, that's for the normal component, and this cross product angular acceleration crossed with r is giving you the angular acceleration times the r for the tangential component. Okay, now this equation we saw before, that was back in section 17.2, the sum of the moments about the mass center is equal to the moment of inertia about the mass center times the angular acceleration. That's what we have here. The new thing in this section is that you might want to sum up the moments about point O instead. Point O is a fixed point here, so if you sum up the moments about the fixed point, that is equal to the moment of inertia about the fixed point times the angular acceleration. So you can read this here to see why that is. So that gives us two sets of equations to use here. So we have Newton's second law, and then either the sum of the moments about point G is equal to the moment of inertia about point G times the angular acceleration, or the sum of the moments about point O is equal to the moment of inertia about point O times the angular acceleration. So point G here is the mass center of the body. Point O here is a fixed point. Then along with all of that, if you read through the green box here, we're going to be using the kinematic equations, which we had back in chapter 16 for angular rotation. Those were similar to the equations that we had back in chapter 12, so we may need to use those also. And you can read over everything in chapter 17.4 on your own, and then take a look at the example problems.